Hello and welcome to this beginner HTML and CSS website layout tutorial. In this tutorial we will be working on this layout where I will be showing you how to use properties like floats, margins and overflows as of 2015. Even though we will be going over some of these more complex properties, I do recommend you looking up basic HTML and CSS theory and other basics before jumping into making this website. The software I'm going to be using for this is called Brackets and works great as a replacer for Sublime or just Notepad++. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. So with the basic HTML structure created, we're going to start off by thinking very simple. The first thing introduced on the website is a white header, so let's create a couple of header tags. And inside the header there's a logo located on the left side of the header, so we're going to create a div class tag with the class logo with an image inside. A link will be available in the description to download the logo used in this example. A good thing to remember is we use div tags to define sections in HTML documents. The HTML div element is normally a block level element, which means it usually takes up a whole line without styling. And some known block elements are h1, the p tag, the paragraph tag, the unordered list, and the table. If you want to learn more about the differences between blocks and inline elements, like I suggest you do, I will also leave a link in the description to a video all about it. So moving on, we got some navigation, so we're going to declare a nav with a nav tag and a couple of list tags with some text inside. Okay, so we have the markup for the header, but there's going to occur a problem in styling of this. How are we going to position all of the information on the center of the page? Well, hopefully you maybe have some idea of how to do this. We're going to be using something called a wrapper or a container, and it's going to be a class we're going to define. For this example, I'm going to be calling it a container, and I'm going to create a container div class tag just inside the header tag, so we get all the information highlighted that's in the header. Moving on to the styling, we start off by styling everything on the website by adding a style to the body. First we reset the margins to 0 and the padding to 0, and then we declare a font family just to make it look a bit neater, which you will have to link in the HTML first. And then it takes color of dark gray and a background color of light gray. I will add a link in the description for copying and pasting the font link into your own HTML document. The container that will be centering all of the elements on the middle of the page will be declared like this, and contain a punctuation in the beginning because it is a class selector and not an ID selector. An ID selector should be unique within the page, while a class selector can declare multiple places on the website. You may then ask yourself, why didn't we use the ID for the header then? Well, simply because it's easier to always use a class, because then if you ever need that class for something else later, you could just use the already created class for something else in your document. The container is pretty simple to style and only contains the styling max width of 960 pixels, width of 96% and margin auto. The max width will basically make sure that the width of the container can't be bigger than 960 pixels wide, but can be smaller, which is very useful for responsive websites. The width of 96% will basically make sure that there's going to be a margin on the size of the container once we shrink the browser down. And the margin auto will basically take both sides of the container and make sure there's enough the same equal amount of margin on both sides to contain the container on the center of the page. These two stylings are great default styling which I recommend memorizing, especially the light gray F3, F3, F3 and the white FFF. And guys, don't forget to style the H2 title element white, as we just set the default text color of the project to light gray, and we don't want that later for our titles. So moving on to styling the header, we're going to give the header a background color of white, so FFF, and a margin on the bottom for further use to 20 pixels. And then we're going to do the logo and we're going to float it to the left and give it a margin from the top of 10 pixels. Further on, we're going to make a navigation or we're going to float the navigation to the right and then give it a line height of 70 pixels, and the line height I'll come back to. Further on, we're going to style the childs of the navigation, and we're going to display them inline block, which is kind of what we talked about earlier, and you got to check that link out if you don't know what that is. And we're going to give it a padding of 5 pixels height and 20 pixels width, with a margin left of 10 pixels to get some space between the words. A background color for the padding of light gray as the background of the project, and a line height to normal, which basically resets the line height from the line height of 70 pixels that we gave to the navigation right before. You know what, I'm going to talk a little bit about the inline block elements. Inline block elements are kind of like inline elements, but they can also have a width and a height. And usually you'll see two types of tutorials on YouTube that contains the navigation. You'll see the ones that uses inline block elements, just like we're using, to basically line up all the navigation, our home, about, work, and contact. And then you'll see the people that floats the navigation to the right and then floats the listed items to the right or left, depending on how you want it. The problem is with the floating to the right or left of the listed items, which are nested inside of the navigation, you won't be able to get the width and height that easy on the listed elements. In this case, the text that we have, and I therefore recommend always using inline block elements. And I found it really confusing. I couldn't figure out why people were using different methods of on how to make navigation, but I do recommend using this method just for a beginner. So moving on, one thing you'll notice right now is that the white background that we added earlier to the header isn't there, it's gone. And that is because the header is relying on wrapping around the content inside of it. And with the use of floats, we position our elements on either the left or the right side. And in this case, the header doesn't kind of register the elements being floated as inside of it, but rather on top inside of it. I will also leave a link in the description to a video explaining floats much better than what I just did. So at this point, we're going to be using the property called overflow hidden. And this is going to basically prevent an element's margin from collapsing with its children and prevent an element from extending behind an adjacent floated element. So overflow hidden basically prevents our header from collapsing with the logo and navigation. And you will often see the use of clear floats and clear fixes, but they're not exactly the same as overflow hidden. But I'll always recommend, if you're a beginner, just try overflow hidden whenever you when you have a problem where a color or the background won't appear after you use the float or multiple floats. Quickly about the line height. The first line height style we give to the navigation itself makes sure that the line height is 70 pixels. After that, we style the listed elements, aka the childs of the navigation, where we basically reset the line height of the elements and not the navigation itself to make it centered inside the navigation. It's a bit complicated to understand, but use it a couple of times and you'll get good with it. Moving on to the content and the title of the page, we are once again going to create a div class with the name container to center everything in the center within a width of 960 pixels. After that, we create the actual class we will be referring to when editing the upcoming elements. The first element is the h2 tag, called a header tag, which I personally call a title. Thereby an article tag with some lorem ipsum text, and you can Google lorem ipsum text and find some there. And another unordered list with a couple of listed items consisting of text once again. So for the last part of this tutorial, we will be styling the content section, and we won't do that by selecting the content class itself, but the h2 tag within the content class. We give the h2 tag a background color of orange, aka FF4719, padding of 10 pixel, a border radius of 5 pixel to get those smooth edges going, and a margin of 20 pixel on the bottom. The article will be floating on the left side and will have a width of 600 pixels. And remember guys, our container has a width of 960 pixels. So our unordered list can now only have a max width of 360 pixels because 600 plus 360 equals 960. We now float the unordered list to the right. Also notice how I'm not floating it with the nav tag, but with the unordered list tag. We give the unordered list a width of 250 pixels because it's within the max width of 960 pixels. and we give it a background color of greenish, aka 338989. Further on, we will give the unordered list a padding of 20 pixels, which will add another 40 pixels in height and width total. We also give the unordered list a border radius of 5 pixels for the smooth edges. The property list style none is added to remove the dots that to default follows with an unordered list. To end it all off, change the color of the text in the childs of the unordered list to white from dark gray, and give the list a margin on the bottom of 5 pixels. And there you got it. Hopefully this tutorial somehow made sense to a few people out there. This is my first tutorial, and just leave me a comment if you have any questions, and I will talk to you all later. Peace. And hey, if you end up building more on a website and you get your own logo and whatnot, remember to link me, I want to check it out.